Hello, everyone. That was a really wonderful segment. If anybody has just tuned in halfway through, we've just had 4 talks back to back that are, I guess, sort of collaboration segment. So we had Michael talking about reviewing code. We've had Em and Seb talking about issues, and some of them were even work related. We've had Julia talking about being a QA engineer. And then we've just had Debbie, who was talking about improving agility by defining quality and done. And that's a fantastic effect. I love it.
Thank you.
So we've had loads of questions come in. I think lots of engagement. People have really enjoyed the talks. I'm going to start with you, Michael, if that's okay.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. So Emma Garland has asked about what happens if somebody is too busy to review your code, and it's somebody that you really sort of need, and it's time sensitive. Like, how do you deal with that in a situation where you sort of need to get something done, I suppose?
Yeah, of course. In that case, then you have to fall back on plan B. So either you might allow that person to approve his or her own pull request, which is I mean, really trying to avoid that, or ask some other colleagues. I mean, it really depends on the size of the team. Of course, if you are 2 people and you don't have time, then you don't have a choice. But I mean, the ideal situation is to find somebody else to be able to check that piece of code. But yeah, of course, if it's really not possible, then maybe one way is to make a quicker review. So maybe you don't have time to make the code review the way you would like to do it, but then maybe you can at least have a quick overview and pinpoint the really major issues.
Yeah, would you say that it's worth in some projects sort of budgeting time for code reviews up front, or like having that sort of built into the way that the team works as part of the structure?
I think it depends on the project. So I think for really small size project, it's maybe not that necessary, or it also can depend on the criticality of the project or the part that you are working on. I think it's always better because, like I said, you can really, if somebody else looks at your code, he can pinpoint some maybe obvious things you let go through yourself, and so it's always better, I think, for code quality. But yeah, it really depends. If you are 1 or 2 person, then it's maybe worth considering if it's really needed or not. Like you mentioned, depending on maybe budget or time frame, also can depend on the deadline. Sometimes, unfortunately, if you have a too tight deadline, you might decide to let that part get out of the way, kind of.
Yeah. I mean, you made some. I really enjoyed your talk, and you made some really good points. I really enjoyed your Michael's principles for code review and the sort of things that you think are important, and also the delineation between something that's technical and sort of the communication side of it.
Yes,
I think that's really important.
Yeah, because it's really 2 different parts. It's really two different aspects of the reviewing process. So
yeah, and the sort of the communication side quite nicely brings on to Emma and Seb's talk, which is very much about how do we communicate sort of within Umbraco, but also within the wider community, and how do we keep people wanting to keep coming back, but sort of still help like make progress, I suppose. So Emma and Seb, are you ready for a question?
Yeah, nice to see you, Laura. Hello.
No, nice to see you. So you talked a lot about the friendly bot and the sort of automated tasks that you've been able to make more efficient. Are there any other areas or like repetitive tasks in the managing the community that you think could be automated going forwards?
Yeah, I mean, one springs to mind for me. So at present, we really tried hard to keep the number of things that the bot does to the bare minimum, because we really want to cultivate a friendly experience. And, you know, friendliness is, it's exactly our ethos. It's you know, we can boil down so many of our principles to this idea of friendliness. So when people are giving up their time to make a contribution, and raising a bug is a contribution, we want them to meet somebody and we want them to be thanked. at the moment, there are a few things that we will do with every single issue that we won't that we don't enlist the bot for, actually, that we would say, thanks, here's what's going to happen next if you've reported a bug, etc., etc. So I like using the bot when it's for information giving, but I do think that there's still scope for a friendly human response too. It's just how we scale that with a team of 2. So for me, it's the information giving task that I'd hand over to the bot. And I think Seb might have something different to add.
No, you did perfectly. I have nothing to add there.
Okay.
And you showed a little bit of the back office of the bot and the sort of different responses it could give.
Yeah.
Would you consider open sourcing that so that people could PR in their own potential responses?
Oh yeah, that's a great idea. I don't think we can. It's actually, as you might have seen, it's actually content managed in Umbraco, so it's a bit hard to open source. But maybe we could take your issues on the issue tracker, and if you want to help formulate some nice text, then just leave us a message, and that would be amazing. Yeah.
We could leverage the power of GitHub discussions for this too. What else could the bot say, and use the discussions as a forum for people to suggest things. Yeah. But yeah, at the minute, all the character from the bot comes from us. So you're very much dealing with us when you're speaking to the bot.
Which is how it should be, I feel. Wonderful. Julia, are you good for some questions now as well?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful. Your talk, I really enjoyed it. I particularly enjoyed the Node.js song. It's definitely gone straight to the top of one of my favorites.
Thank you.
And there was a lot of engagement. Lots of other people also really enjoyed the talk. And it's obvious how experienced and how many different sort of projects you've worked on and the different parts of the project cycle that you've been able to touch. It's amazing.
Thank you.
So we had a couple of questions come in. One around, there were a couple that quite related, and it's towards kind of getting buy-in from other departments. Is it difficult? Do you find it difficult to get sort of QA testing buy-in for other departments that aren't necessarily directly related to it? Or is it something that you think should just sort of be from the beginning?
So it has improved over time, where persons are now seeing the value of QA a lot more, but there is still some issues where they don't think it deserves as much time as development. But QA is a part of the development. In order to ship a product, you need to have that product tested. So in order to get buy-in, you just have to do research, talk with stakeholders, understand their hesitancy in having QA. Some persons just think that QA is a bottleneck, and so it's going to take more time. But if you can show them the benefits of having QA and the value that it will have, you're going to have better products. Your customers are going to be happier that they don't get releases that are really buggy. There are so many different benefits. So I have been on projects where they didn't have QA before, and once QA is there, and even what the customers don't see, just the process and the workflow of how work goes, just drastically improves. So make your arguments and discuss it with the persons that need to get it. And if you're a manager or a decision maker here listening, QA is really important and you should have it.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And that was definitely shone through in Debbie, your talk as well, because obviously it was all about the importance of how that is a keystone rather than an add-on.
Yeah.
We had another question as well for you, Julia, around if you had to choose one, if you were, talking to somebody who was just getting into testing or getting into QA engineering, if you had to choose one, what would be your single most important testing principle? I feel a bit like I'm on blind date now.
Don't come in with preconceived notions. Go in there and try to do things differently. So if you're testing an e-commerce website, not all e-commerce websites are the same, even though, yes, you do have a checkout workflow, you do have payments, but there are going to be things that they may not have done properly, features that are specific to a unique business. So try to think outside of the box and always try to improve your mindset and expand on that. There are so many different things to learn, but take your time to learn them, and think in your approach about all different types of users, not just abled users, but users that are disabled that may need screen readers, etc., and try to be inclusive and have a diversity of thought when you're doing testing.
That's, yeah, definitely. Yeah, there were a couple of talks earlier in the day around accessibility, and it's one of those areas that it's still trying to get into the normal workflow of these sort of startup style projects where, like you were saying in your talk, Debbie, this whole like fail fast, fail often, those kind of slogans almost. I think there was one slogan that you had that made me like shrink a little bit, which was the "if you're not embarrassed, you ship too late," and I was like, oh, that's horrible. Just the idea of being embarrassed about your code out in the wild, just, I don't know, nightmares. Yeah, so are you okay if I come to you now, Debbie?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So your talk was really dynamic. So much information. I think I will probably have to watch it like a bunch more times to sort of take everything in.
That's what I hear. Sorry about that.
No, it's good. It's very efficient. And I guess your sort of outlook is more that a project at the moment is kind of almost being run a bit backwards. It should be more like a science experiment. You should start with like a hypothesis and like prove that things like work for the customer, for the end user, rather than sort of meeting just business requirements. Would you say that's?
Yeah, I would say the business requirements, why aren't those built around the customer? Why is it a bunch of people in a room going, we should build this, or what do you think of this, or I think people would like this? What happened to having business intelligence that helps us make better decisions? And so I think that a customer centricity can be brought into every level of an organization. That's also going to help get buy-in for QA, because on no planet do I think that we should be shipping code, because if you don't have proper QA people like Julia doing this work, your customer is your QA person, and your customer is going to find the bugs. And now, well, congratulations, you can now be embarrassed by your product. You win Silicon Valley bros. So I think it's very important to make sure that from the very earliest strategies and planning, we have a sense of who our customers are, what are they doing now, where is this working, not working, and what are our opportunities to create something that really matches their needs? Because it's probably hard for any of you to think of a system or software or app that you love so freaking much because it really fits your needs and it's not a pile of crap that you can't wait for them to update.
Here. And would you say that like there is such a thing as a perfect product? Like where would what constitutes sort of good enough to go out the door? Like, how do you draw that line?
Yeah, great question, because it's never perfect, at least not in our CX and UX world. You know, we look back at it a week later and go, oh. So I would say that we like to learn, build, test. You know, we like to create things that match customers' needs and tasks. So if we've done the right research to know what people, like, let's bring this puppy out. If we've done the right research to know that who our customers are and their tasks and where these tasks go right and wrong, and we can come up with a one or more solutions or features that improve those tasks, then we could say, okay, for now, this improves this task. Like, think about your sprint goals, benefit to customer. We now know that there is a benefit to customer because we have improved the customer's task. They need to pay, now they can pay. Or Julia was saying a checkout, the checkout needs to be more efficient, clearer, accessible. Those are concrete goals. Let's make sure that we build something that really does improve those things. Over in UX, we don't test things for, do people like it and is it pretty? We test things for, does this match real customers' needs and goals? And I think that would be awesome. You know, it may not be perfect, but even if our companies did that, I think it would be super awesome and so much better than what many of us do now, which is just cry and polish up our CVs.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it's interesting as well, because obviously we come from this sort of open source background, and this I guess really what drives it is, in our case, essentially, as a developer, I am not quite the end user of Umbraco, but I am sort of somewhere in the middle, a user of Umbraco, which then drives me to improve it because I have the capability to do so. But obviously the customer, all they can say is like, this doesn't work, or this doesn't work. This doesn't do what I was expecting it to do. So,
and we shouldn't be surprised by that. If we're surprised by that, we're out of touch. And that reminds us to do more research. We shouldn't be surprised when someone goes, hey, this wasn't exactly what I needed. Holy cats, why didn't we know that?
Yeah, I wonder, and this is maybe one for Emma and Seb, I wonder what capacity there is, because obviously you get a lot of feedback from the development engineering sector, but that sort of quite often comes like second or third hand from clients who have used it at the other side, and then it's sort of petered back through. Developers have felt the pain, they've gone in and done a PR. Like, is there a way that we could get customers closer to the Umbraco source code? Just throwing that out there.
It's a very good question. Indeed, it's very much like Chinese whispers sometimes, where we have to find out what the person who reports this issue actually meant that their customer had wrong with the product. I don't have the answers for this. We talk to a lot of developers, of course, and we keep talking to them, and we keep trying to tease out. Usually, when someone reports a feature request, I try to tease out, okay, what is the actual use case here? What is the problem that you actually encountered? Because we know developers, and they always think in solutions and not so much in where the problem actually came from. So we try to encourage them to actually talk to us about, okay, what was your actual problem? I know you have a solution already, but maybe we can actually figure out the broader problem that we have there, and make a general solution instead of just something that is for you now relevant.
It's when discussion becomes even more important too. And when you're interacting with people on GitHub, it's really difficult sometimes to tease out those needs of the end user. One of the things that we had to update was the issue tracker templates, because quite often the developers would speak in not vague terms, but terms that were precise for their use case. But of course, this side of the fence, it's really difficult to tell what the end goal is. And if we're not thinking of end goals, as Debbie just said, then, you know, we're creating something that can't be used or shouldn't be used, and certainly might not be wanted. Yeah. So talk is incredibly important. We've got a number of places where we talk. You know, for us, we've got RFCs. We've now enabled GitHub discussions, which we hope to see as just a fantastic place for people to get those requirements out there, really discuss the value of features, the value of changing certain things. Sometimes you even find that a feature request is for something that already exists. You know, there's already a path, so we can solve people's problems without writing any code, which is always a win, absolutely always a win. But we need a place for that discussion to happen. It has to happen in a place of psychological safety too. So we work really hard to ensure that these conversations are constructive. Of course, we're dealing with global developers too, so there's all kinds of ways that we're hoping that we can try to help people relate. So we aim to remove friction and just really kind of get that going. But we cannot stress enough that if we don't hear from lots of people, then we can't be making those choices. So with a huge community, but a handful of very vocal people, we want to convince people that their opinion matters. Anyone that works with the product, any end user, it all matters. And the more we have, the more empowered we are to make the right decisions. So really just encouraging people to come forward. And we hope that because you will have such a good experience, you will come forward. You will know that it matters. And that's how we aim to make a product that is, you know, loved by everybody who touches it. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
High goals, yeah.
Small goals.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting and not at all surprising, but there's been a sort of common thread through all of the collaboration talks about how important communication is, and not just in like say what you mean, but in sort of the nuanced sense of making somebody feel safe to accept feedback on their PR, like Michael was talking about, and Julia was talking about the idea of being able to translate what you want to do within the wider picture as well. And I think it's such an overlooked skill, but not on purpose, because it is very much, certainly with the other open source projects, because it's sort of a bunch of developers to begin with, it becomes the core skill then becomes your engineering skill, and then you're almost having to build in the communication afterwards.
And we get it wrong sometimes as well. I recently had an interesting interaction where it was like we had to scratch our heads and go, oh yeah, we actually tried to do the right thing here, but we didn't talk to anybody about what we were doing. So we actually had to take it back and go, oh yeah, let's see with all the feedback we get now where we actually should have landed instead of where we landed in the end. And that's fine. We love to admit our mistakes as well and fix them as much as we can going forward.
Yeah, I one of the questions that is here for you, Michael, is around people feeling safe to put PRs in or have their PRs reviewed, and often it's not in their first language, or it's not in, and that I think must be quite challenging, because there's a lot of nuance, and like you were talking about, there's a lot of ways of saying, should this be like this, and it's hard.
Yes, indeed. I think that's the most difficult part. I mean, if everything is okay, that's fine. You just say thank you, nicely done, and everybody will be happy about that. The issue, the difficulty is more indeed if you need to tell that there's some rework needed, and so that's what the main part of my talk was about, because that's really to me the most important thing as well, because you want that person to accept the remark and to say, oh, okay, yeah, it's right. So I will do the update or make the change. And I think it's important that that person feels comfortable, because we want her to come back next time. So not just say, okay, I will do this time because I want my PR to be merged, but it's the last time I do that. You really want that person to say, okay, that I got some remarks, but it was constructive. Maybe I learned some new things or new feature or something I didn't know about Umbraco, and I do that next time. So I think that's really the most important aspect indeed.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess it's the product of being a global project, but yeah.
But once you get to know some people, then it's easier. But of course, we have lots of new first-timers, so indeed you need to be quite careful about how you handle stuff.
Yes. Yeah. No, definitely. So I think we are out of. Well, I don't think there was any other burning questions that anybody had. I guess if you go back to the QA, the test sort of amazing. The test QA life cycle. Are there any situations where you think it would be acceptable not to test, or is it always obviously there's different tests that you can do for different processes, but are there any where you wouldn't?
I'm trying to think. There have been circumstances where we haven't tested because of lack of time, but those are more like constraints as to why we didn't test. I'm not getting any scenarios why I have this time but I didn't test just because I didn't need to. There are things like test automation that could help you not to manually test. So if you have your test automation code already running, it's still testing, but you don't have to do as much hands-on manual testing because your test automation will help you out.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I guess a lot of it is experience as well, sort of knowing where the pain points might be and sort of when it's super necessary and when constraints aren't.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Your talks were all fantastic. I enjoyed them all. If anybody wants to catch up, I think you've all posted links and ways to get in contact with you. And I think you all deserve a lot of drinks at the Codegarden bar, and probably like real life drinks as well, for sure.
We'll get to that.
That's for next year, yeah.
Yes, when we can all see each other again in person. But
Thank you,
for
Laura.
being there.
Thank you for looking after us.
Thank you.
Thank you.